is the children of Abraham. Now, bring out our map here. We'll use this one first. It's the same, well, this is the larger of this one. Anyway, Abraham, all of a sudden in chapter 25, he takes a wife, her name is Keturah, and he has all of these children born to it. I don't know about you, but every time I read that, given the trouble between Hagar and Sarah and Ishmael and Isaac, all of a sudden, to come across Abraham taking another wife and having all of these other children, it just always struck me as strange. But they're not mentioned except right here. And except for Midian, the other names are kind of silent. You don't really have them refer to any other place. Midian, of course, become the Midianites, and there is some exchange or some significant references to the Midianites throughout the dealings of Israel in the land. Now, of all of the children, Ishmael is the one who really bears, besides Isaac, Ishmael is the one who really bears some significance for today. Now, I have the East country there. It's kind of highlighted in that, with those pluses or something. It says that Abraham sent all of his children to the East country, and that's probably the location of the East country. Now, why is that important? Well, it seems like as we begin to talk about Ishmael, that all of these other children of Abraham seem to kind of get assimilated by the Ishmaelites. They're the ones who rise to the prominent place, and that's going to be significant because according to Muslim tradition, Ishmael is really important. Muhammad himself was a Hanif and one of the descendants of Ishmael, the son of Abraham. So the Arabs, they want to trace their lineage to Ishmael, and then we said that Muhammad was a Hanif. I didn't know what this was, but a Hanif refers to one who, according to Islamic belief, maintained the pure monotheism of the patriarch Abraham. Okay, so what the Arabs say is that Muhammad believed in only one God. He was monotheistic. He traced his lineage to Ishmael, and so they it becomes really important. Ishmael and the Ishmaelites and the descendants of Ishmael become really the prominent or the standout among the Arabs today. So it's pretty interesting because of the conflict that exists between the Arabs and the Israelis, and it all goes back to Abraham's compromise with Hagar. So that has really had some far-reaching impact throughout the history of the world, even to this day. Now, there are going to be some other conflicts that Israel has with other peoples of the land. Of course, you have the Canaanites, but they're not descendant from anybody that's related to Abraham. But you have the Ammonites, who are related to who? Does anybody remember? Ammonites. To what? Lot. That's right. The Ammonites are related to Lot, or descendants of Lot, who's related to Abraham. You have the Moabites, who are descendants of Lot. All right, so you have the Moabites also who are going to have some kind of engagement with Abraham or the Israelites. You have the Midianites, which apparently are descendant of Abraham himself, here from our passage. And then you have the Edomites, who are going to be the descendants of Esau, which is also related to Abraham. So you have the Ishmaelites, going to be the Arabs, and then you have the Ammonites and the Moabites, which are of Lot, Midianites, which are of Abraham, and Edomites, which are of Esau. So these are going to be the descendants of Abraham who have trouble with or have some kind of friction with the Israelites. And then, of course, you have all of the other descendants which are outside of the descendants of the children of Abraham. So Ishmael is an important person, and so we come to the end of the genealogy here. Of course, this is Abraham's death that we look at here in verses 7 through 11. He dies at 175 years old, and Ishmael and Isaac. Now this is pretty interesting too, because you remember Abraham sent Ishmael and Hagar away, right? And they went towards the west towards the land of Shur and over towards Egypt, because that's where Hagar was from. She was an Egyptian. However, it seems like they kind of dwelt in the Sinai Peninsula there, and I think that there is some assimilation over into the East country. And of course, I say that because the Arabs spread throughout the whole, this whole region, especially the Saudi Arabian Peninsula, which is on this side over here, and it's much larger than the Sinai Peninsula, which we have pictured there. But even though Abraham had sent Ishmael and Hagar away, there is still some communication between Ishmael and Isaac, and they're both coming together. And there's no sign or evidence that there's contention between them here. They come together for the burial of Abraham at his death. In verses 25, verse 18, it says they dwelt, this is talking about the Ishmaelites, they dwelt from Havilah as far as Shur, which is east of Egypt, as you go toward Assyria. Now, Assyria is going to be far to the north, and Havilah, it's really unclear where Havilah is, but Havilah might be the Saudi Arabian Peninsula, and so that's why there's from Shur, which is up where you can see where it says Hebron up there. Shur is going to be a little bit where the Mediterranean just kind of flats out the curve. That's where the land of Shur is. So if you have from Shur, which is at the top of the Sinai Peninsula, over through Havilah on the way to Assyria, those are the Ishmaelites, and that's where you have Arab people, historically speaking, as far as I could tell. I mean, I'm not an expert on that by any means. All right, any questions on that? The descendants of Abraham, the death of Abraham. Any comments or questions on that before we move on to the second half of the chapter? All right. Oh, I did have a map with Shur and Havilah on it. All right, we come to Isaac and Rebekah. So Abraham has died, and we move to, the narrative moves to Isaac and Rebekah, and it's going to focus on them. There are a lot of parallels between Isaac and his father Abraham, and a lot of differences as well. But one of the things right off the bat is that Rebekah is barren, just like Sarah was barren. And so this is going to be one of the similarities between them. But, the way that it unfolds is a little bit different. The Lord causes her to conceive just by their prayers, and there's really a focus on the Lord in this passage. She is barren, and so where do they go? They go to the Lord and ask for his blessing so that she might conceive, and she does conceive. He answers, and not only does he give them one, but she conceives with twins. And then there's a little bit of trouble in the womb there, and she's wondering if everything is okay. And so she goes, it says, the children struggled together within her, and she said, if all is well, why am I like this? So she must have been really uncomfortable in her pregnancy, especially if the two boys were already fighting before they came out. So she must have been really uncomfortable there. So that's her question. If everything's okay, then why am I feeling like this? So what does she do? She goes to the Lord to ask her. So again, there's a focus on the Lord here, and the Lord answers and responds to her with this prophecy: 2 nations are in your womb, 2 peoples shall be separated from your body, 1 people shall be stronger than the other, and the older shall serve the younger. Now, I don't know, if I was Rebekah, I don't know if this prophecy would be comforting to me or disconcerting to me. I'm not exactly sure. Candace, I don't know how you would take it. We'd have to ask Heather how she would take this prophecy. But anyway, this is the prophecy. God gave her twins. And I guess the part about each one of them becoming a nation, that's pretty good, right? Okay, that's pretty cool. So each one is going to multiply to some degree. And so I'm going to have some children here. They're going to be strong and influential. They're going to have their own nations come from them. But then you have this contention between them. One will be stronger than the other, and the older will serve the younger. And that part just kind of, takes the prophecy a little south, if you know what I mean there, and not exactly sure if that's a positive thing or not a positive thing. Now, when we consider what's happening here, this is really significant, and God is behind the whole thing. I mean, God is the one who put the twins in her womb to begin with, right? He's the one that did it. And he is the one who wanted to make a nation of each one. It was God's idea from the beginning. And he said, the child of the promise would be served, even though he was younger. And God is the one who just kind of orchestrated how they were going to be born. And then, this is the most impactful statement concerning Jacob and Esau in the womb. It says that God loved one and hated the other. And that's the most troubling. I mean, as far as people, when we come to the scriptures, to come to grips with that, before they had done good or bad, Jacob was loved by God and Esau was hated by God. And you cannot escape the providence of God, the sovereignty of God, when you're considering that statement. And it's unavoidable. And so that's why a lot of people have trouble with it, and we have to wrestle with it, but that's what it says. In Romans chapter 9, verse 13, just says it plainly. And that's not the only place. There's another psalm which says it also. Jacob I have loved, Esau I have hated. And it's kind of interesting, I guess, as you move past that, and then the children are born, and Esau comes out and he's red and he's hairy, and then there's Jacob and he's not as maybe not as thick as Esau is. He's a little softer, and he'd rather stay home, and he's a good cook apparently, because Esau wanted his food while Esau is the hunter, and he goes out, and what happens is the children are growing. They are so different, and what happens is that Jacob and Rebekah Isaac and Rebekah, they have favorites among their children. And that right there is just kind of a clue that, they were seeking the Lord before, but to have favorites among the children is just, you're just kind of asking for trouble there, especially in this culture where the older and the younger and the birthright and the blessing and all that kind of comes into the play. You're going to start picking favorites in this way. It's just kind of foreshadowing the tension and the strife that is going to build up and exist between the two. So Isaac goes for Esau, and Rebekah goes for Jacob, and so this is going to have some significance in their lives. And then you have this section between Jacob and Esau. And Esau comes in from the field, and it's kind of ironic, because if he was such a great hunter, which he was, he comes back and he's got really nothing to show for it, and he's really tired, and he's really hungry, and he sees Esau cooking the red, and he wants some. Now, notice how it says in verse 30, it says, Esau said to Jacob, please feed me with some of that red. And it has stew in parentheses. By the way, italics. How many of you have italics for the stew? Yeah, italics doesn't mean that the word is emphasized. The italics mean the word is added. So it's he's saying, I want some of that red stuff there. But if you want to put stew in, it doesn't matter. Called it a stew in verse 29. But Esau doesn't call it stew. He calls it the red stuff. Now this is kind of funny, because now it says Esau said to Jacob, please feed me with some of that red stew, for I am weary. Therefore his name was called Edom. And we read that in English, it's like, what? What's the kind of red and Edom? What's the connection there? However, there is a connection, and let's see. Esau says, please feed me now from that red, that Adom. That's the Hebrew word, Adom. And this red, Adom, because I am starving. So it says it twice. And then it says, therefore his name was Edom. So that's the connection there. That's why you go from red to Edom. That's why its name is called Edom, because red in Hebrew sounds like Edom. It's just a little shift in the word. So Esau asks for the red, and his name is going to be red. We've already seen that when they were born. He was red, Edom, when he was born, and he was also hairy. The word hairy in Hebrew, the word is seer. And seer is going to be important in the the land of the Edomites, because Mount Seir is kind of the capital of Edom. And so you'll see these three words used to refer to the people of Esau. You have Esau, you have Edom, and you have Seir. Those three words. And they're all related to Esau, his redness, his desire for redness, and his hairiness. All right, so I could make a joke here, but it would really not be appropriate concerning God loving and hating these kids. But anyway. Jacob, on the other hand, he is going to, his name is, his name really means, there's two things. There's heel and there's cheat. Those are the two names that are related to Jacob. So what happens is, Esau is criticized, and rightly so, because he comes in and for some food, he sells his birthright. And that's pretty significant. And it shows Esau is just given over to his fleshly, worldly, lustful demands. That's Esau. And because he is hungry, he can't look past that fleshly craving, desire, need to the more significant birthright blessing. And so, what is this birthright to me? I'm about to die. So he agrees in the heat of the moment to sell it to Jacob for the food. Now, we can pick on Esau, and we should. I mean, the New Testament is this is what's going to say about Esau. Hebrews chapter 12, verses 14 through 16. This is what it says: "Pursue peace with all people and holiness, without which no one will see the Lord. Looking carefully, lest anyone fall short of the grace of God, lest any root of bitterness spring up, causing trouble, and by this many become defiled, lest there be any fornicator or profane person like Esau, who for one morsel of food sold his birthright." So it really lowers the hammer on Esau in Hebrews. He is basically the man without faith, as opposed to Jacob, who is going to have faith, but Jacob is going to have to learn it the hard way. Because in this passage, if Esau is truly starving and near death, or even if he's just hungry, what is this trickery where you are going to connive to take your brother's birthright for him and withhold the food from him? So I don't think that Jacob is, he's not as bad as Esau, if you will, but he's not innocent either. And he's going to be known for his trickery and his deceitful hand. And it's going to come full scale with Rebekah and Isaac and, the giving of the blessing in the chapters to come. I don't know if it's the next chapter or if it's in 2 chapters from now. So, the trickery is going to come when Jacob has to flee for his life because Esau is going to kill him. He goes to his father Laban, and he tricks Laban. Laban tricks him, and they're just kind of going back and forth at each other. And it's just characteristic of his life. And it's not, I think, it's not until he seeks to return and he is confronted with Esau once again many years later. I think it's not until that point where he really learns the meaning of humility and is willing to submit. And of course, in the end, he's going to be blessed. But even with his 12 children, there's going to be trouble, and there's going to be, back and forth and favorites. And so this is something that's just not going to leave the family quickly. And so this is the story here of Jacob and Esau. All right. Any comments on this part, or any questions or thoughts? Ben?
Back a little bit, but just a question, I guess, for when they were having favorites with the kids. Do you think, by any chance, her favoritism for
Jacob?
Yeah, getting all the names in the head off a
Right.
little bit. would that be based on because she had that response from the Lord saying that the older would serve the younger? I mean, maybe that like influenced her lashing onto him.
No, I see what you're saying.
Because like typically it wouldn't be the person, right?
I would say that she would not have forgotten this prophecy, if it was so significant. If there's any influence in her life because of it, and so she's leaning towards Jacob because, the prophecy, and maybe, she's kind of going in the way that, according to the prophecy there, and thus favoring Jacob. If so, it doesn't even hint at that.
Yeah.
So, the only thing that might point in that is that, I mean, if I got a prophecy from the Lord, it doesn't matter what it was, I wouldn't forget that. However, you would also think that Isaac, being kind of the head of the house and, being spiritual, he wouldn't have forgot it either. And maybe the two of them would have conspired together to kind of lift Jacob up. But there's all the way to the end. It's Isaac and Esau and Rebekah and Jacob. And when we get to the whole deceitful situation, there's so many questions about that. How in the world was Isaac duped like he was? That's just always been another puzzle, to me. But anyway, we'll get there and we'll be able to hash that out at that point. So anyways, I would say possibly, because they wouldn't have forgotten the prophecy, but it doesn't say anything more about it. So it's just kind of silent. It's almost as if, sometimes you'll read a scripture and you'll say, like, I have no idea what that means, right? You're reading the prophets, like, I have no idea what that means. I mean, you have it right there in front of you, and it might mention Jerusalem and Babylon Unite. You know where those places are, right, Beverly? Yeah? You have a question? Yeah.
I was just Jacob and Esau.
Uh-huh.
Esau was a big, strong guy. Why didn't he just take the pit from Jacob?
Because he was starving.
That's right. Why did he just pound Jacob and take the food for himself? That's a good question. I hadn't thought about that, Beverly. That's a good comment there. He must have been like on all fours, just barely making it back to the tent, and didn't have any hope of beating up Jacob at that point. But yeah, that's a good observation there. Why didn't he just pound him down and take his food from him? Get out of my way. Just give him one shove and give me that food. All right. So Esau had some more respect than to just take it from him, while Jacob showed no respect to take the birthright from Esau. So that's more on the Jacob. He's going to be this cheat and steal his birthright from his brother. I mean, now God said the younger would, be the one where the blessing flows. It would have worked out. I don't know how, but God would have worked it out without, this subterfuge that's going to be characteristic of them. But, we tend to take things into our own hands sometimes. And so that's what they're doing. And just like Abraham took things in his own hands, and we have the whole Ishmael and Isaac and Arab and Israeli situation today. So sometimes our choices can have long-term ramifications. All right, let's move on to prayer time. Number of people to pray.